This episode is proudly sponsored by Resilience Through Fitness. RTF's whole body health approach focuses on helping first responders get adequate rest, fuel, and physical preparedness for their challenging shifts serving the communities they love. The RTF coaching staff are all current first responders that have a passion for fitness. With one-on-one online coaching tailored specifically to your gym, home, and traveling needs, the staff strives to ensure that you come home safe at the end of the shift. RTF also donates a portion of select sales back to supporting veteran and first responder charities. Use the discount code GRITTY15 for 15% off your personalized coaching or next order online. That's GRITTY15 at resilience-through-fitness.com. All one word, resilience-through-fitness.com.
But no, how does that hypervigilance translate to home life? Not well, right? If you're looking for threats at home, you're going to find them. You're going to find them. At the end of the day, you will have your health or what remains of it and your family or what remains of it after you have the job.
Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
Today we have a solo cast where I want to riff on a topic that I wrote about recently for Police One, and that was part of the Ask Tongue column. And the question that was posed, so a huge shout out to the person that posed this prompt, this question some time ago, but she essentially asked, how does one coming into the law enforcement career navigate and consider the dynamics and the stigmas and the stereotypes or the trends, however you want to put it, with police marriage being so difficult, with incidents of divorce being so high, with risk-seeking behavior, with cheating? How do you reconcile all this, knowing you still want to be a cop and you want to come in, but you don't want to resign yourself to be thinking that you just can't have a healthy, functional marriage or relationship? And what a huge question. What a really responsible, deep dive of a question for someone coming into this field, knowing that is what she wants to do, but hearing so many examples and seeing so many people in her networks, people she interacts with that share these struggles. Like, it is a lot to bite off, knowing that you do want to have a relationship or a marriage or a family one day. I sat with that question for a while and I thought about how to tackle it. And I think in some ways I thought a little narrowly at first, because I was like, well, I mean, I have like a super supportive wife and I have what I would view to be an imperfect but very healthy relationship. And I started thinking about my context, but if I'm honest with it, yes, I do have my personal insight in the here and now, but it's not easy, you know. Like, I have a very patient, supportive wife, but not without a lot of stress and a lot of kind of maybe growth that was necessary through challenges when we were together earlier. I've said this, I don't think on the podcast, but I've certainly said in my personal circles or friends at work that, you know, if I had been married, I have very strong confidence that if I had been married as a young officer, basically the guy that I was when I came in at 21, 22 years old, I don't know that I would have stayed married. I don't know that I would have stayed married. And I don't know that I would have had a balance of the personal insight, the maturity, and that's not just age, that's just in context with the job and adapting to this very extremely different way to look at the job. And I know a lot of it came with age, for me at least, and having the right support mechanisms and having the right understanding to have this foundation of success in a relationship. And so I consider all that. And then I also consider the volumes of people, dozens, hundreds of officers that I've met and worked closely with or kind of ancillary with. And out of all these teams and these people that I've interacted with, Like how many stories you hear or you see up close, all the dynamics we're talking about, right? All the challenging factors that manifest in a lot of marriages, but with stress even more so. And we know first responder work is by default going to have a lot of stress, not just for the first responder and what they're seeing and interacting with and actually doing, not the danger itself only, not solely that, but also the partner's experience not being there and knowing that that's what their loved one is being susceptible to, what they're being injected into. Also shift work, also hypervigilance, all these things. And so I went to a couple experts, and you can listen to episode 149 for the deeper dive, where Sarah Horowitz, a mental health clinician, and Dr. Minda O's, a clinician as well, a doctor in that right, and author and first responder spouse herself. We analyze all these different factors and what they look like and how they manifest, some anecdotes, some examples, some takeaways, and some skills, and where to go from that. That was a huge conversation. I highly recommend it. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from that episode, so check it out if you haven't. Share it out to your circles so we can all be healthier first responder families. But to distill it down for the purpose of and the scope of this article, outlined it in a few ways, right? So we know a lot of the challenges. I nodded to some of them, but there are three main points that my article outlines as far as why they're uniquely challenging. And the first one's hypervigilance, right? I already said it, but we learn to be hypervigilant to stay alive. Firefighter in a structural fire, there are things you're looking out for, things you're seeing, hearing, feeling, and detecting them will help you and your buddy stay alive. Detecting them and addressing them or navigating them, absolutely. Law enforcement, human behavior, furtive movements, people angling away, people target locking, people looking through you, people looking down at your weapons, people dodging their hands in their pockets. Like these things, if not addressed, can absolutely hurt or kill us or our friends or innocent people. We have to be really dialed in on our senses to pick up on these things. Lies. I was told block one in field training, two of my first lessons I learned from my first FTO. One, everyone lies. Two, everyone's stupid. So even if they're not intentionally lying, they're probably lying because they're stupid. I could probably do a whole nother episode about those two lessons and the cynical nature behind it and what it tells a young officer who's trying to learn this whole career and way of looking at the world. But what does that say, right? It says, trust no one. And I believe it was Mattis, and then they've had many cops paraphrase this through the years in my training and just interaction. But yeah, be polite to everyone you encounter, but have a plan to kill them. Again, what does that build within you? And I'm not saying that grandma can't kill you. I'm not saying let your guard down. I'm just speaking to how that contributes to hypervigilance, right? It makes me think about how someone shared that they got written up in field training when they were doing a vehicle lockout, right? So our city, like some, if a civilian locks their keys in their car, then we'll come out with a kit so they don't have to spend like $200 with a tow company and get gouged. Like we'll just come out, help them out, and we get to it when we get to it. But the officer, the student, was handed the flashlight to like this middle-aged or older woman who they're helping get in their car, right? Hey, can you hold the light at this angle? Because I'm really, with the glare, I'm going to try to see into the car. And then they put two hands on the lockout kit, trying to kind of jimmy it in through the window crevice or the crack. And they got dinged for it because you gave this woman your flashlight as a weapon, and they could have just bludgeoned you. It's like, okay, man, like power down. But anywho, hypervigilance is necessary. I'm not disparaging it. It is necessary. I'm saying we need more of it at work. We get complacent, if anything, myself included. Not just now because I'm at a desk a lot, but I'm talking about all the time. In some ways, I'm less hypervigilant now because I'm not out there all the time like my guys and gals. That's when I felt the most complacency, actually, right? When I'm going to calls literally all day long, I'm like, high vigilance, high vigilance, high vigilance, low, high, low, 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 high, low, right? And that's something that we categorically see when people have a handful of years on is they've seen and done so many things, and that's when they let their guard down. But no, how does that hypervigilance translate to home life? Not well, right? If you're looking for threats at home, you're going to find them. You're going to find them. If you're looking for lies, and this is a trend that we hear about people with teenagers, right? A lot of cop parents come at their teenagers with a lot of control, right? A lot of distrust, not distrust of their kid per se, but a distrust of the world. And I totally get it. I don't fully get it. I will one day, but I can start to see it, right? Having my own young kid. I am super worried about what goes on out there. I am increasingly worried about what she's going to see, how she's going to navigate some challenges, some interactions with other kids, with other adults out there. I do think about these things as a dad. However, we got to keep these things in check. We got to realize that being extremely hypervigilant at work, which makes us safe, aka successful, and coming home, our ultimate job, right? Every day, our ultimate job is to come home. It's not best serving us at home. It's not. It's creating an environment of distrust. So we have to make sure that we can toggle that. The second piece is that we are so performance driven that it leads to distance. So when we go with the first element, hypervigilance, that and many other things can start to contribute towards this distrustful environment at home. There's distance. We're not effective at home. Well, shoot, I want to go where I'm wanted. And they're technically going to pay me more than my time. They're going to pay me time and a half. Or shoot, holidays, they're going to pay me double time. I'm going there. I'm going there where my hypervigilance, where my strong personality, where my strong performance is rewarded, where my arrests receive high fives, where my cases and my strong investigations receive kudos from my boss, where my projects, where I'm validated, where the guys appreciate me, where I come in when the other shift is short staffed and say, hey, thanks for being here. And then I know that I'm making them more safe and it's valuable. And you know what? When I'm at home, all I do is make things worse. All I do is inject myself. I say something. I piss off the family. I'm better off here working. And I can give them all the things. I can give them all the money for all the things and be good. And we got a vacation in a month and we're going to blow it out there. Time of our lives. And that's going to be our quality time. It's better this way. Whether we overtly say these things or whether we subconsciously say these things or versions of these things, we have to recognize that it's not fair. It's not healthy to ourselves. It's not healthy to our psyches. And it's certainly not serving the long term for our families. Our families need us to be present. We can't be present all the time. That's how work goes. That's how we live in this industry. We want to be part of this modernized civilization and not homestead, which some of y'all are doing. And that's pretty fantastic and awesome. Jealous of that at times. But if we are wanting to do this profession, yes, we will be away from home a lot. But let's make it a balance. Let's make it a meaningful trade-off, a meaningful sacrifice, a trade of time for resource, for purpose, for team, for accomplishment, all these things. But ultimately, what we need to serve first is our own health and our families. Whether or not, at the end of the day, you will have your health or what remains of it and your family or what remains of it after you have the job. Period. It's what you start with, it's what you leave with. So the third piece, the burden we carry. So we carry a lot of stress angst, exposure to trauma. Everyone carries it differently. I'm not trying to say like we're all scarred, we're all like, just cemented with all this trauma. We can't function. I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying that people that are suffering significant PTSI, PTSD, or PTS symptoms that's undiagnosed, I'm not disparaging that either. I have a lot of interaction with my own PTS symptoms and recognizing them and moving forward through them, right? We all got to do it our own way with a plethora of our own resources, right? Everyone's different. What I'm saying is that we have to recognize that we don't get through it unchecked. And then there are these dynamics that are complicated, whether we want to share that burden through talking to our spouse or partner, or whether we carry it alone. And everyone's different in this, right? I know personally, I'll start personally. I know through the years, I've shared many a gruesome detail or call detail too much to my wife. And I've learned, but I still flub up sometimes. I am kind of a verbal vomit, like dumper of things. And if you don't know me closer, you think that's odd. I am, right? So some of my close friends and colleagues would say, yes, I can when I'm excitable or excited, like I could talk a mile a minute and just dump all this info, get the stuff off my chest. It helps me process to talk about things out loud. And so thank you for enduring that, people. Weird, I have a podcast now. I know that I've said certain things like finding a human head that was way too much for my wife to hear as soon as I said it, right? To see how pallid her face got. And I was like, ooh, cool. Should have called my buddy. Should have called my buddy on the way home and kind of like just talked about the excitement of, oh my gosh, I found a human head in the bushes. And hopefully that wasn't too stressful for anyone to hear here. But the point is, we have to find a balance, because I know many a first responder couple that spouse at home wants to hear all of it. They're actually fascinated by it, right? Because they like true crime. They want to be they want to be inside, right? They feel like that is how they can build alignment and just kind of be there with their spouse, like share in that. Like, yeah, they weren't there, but they know all the big things that their spouse saw or did, and they want to be right there for them, right? So they want to be able to help them through that way. But everyone's different. There's not a right or wrong. How do we find out? We got to talk about it ideally before it's happening, before you get to that critical incident. For those that are newer to the job, like, talk about it now. Hit the pause button, or as soon as you get home, or if you're at home, or even send a text, say, hey, partner, lover, tonight when the kids go down, I want to talk about like how we should share about my stress at work, right? Or you keep it more light, like, hey, our weekly date night, which you should be having something, maybe a coffee date, right? Weekly coffee date. Whatever you have for marriage maintenance, relational maintenance, dream sharing, goal sharing. We all need to do more of it. As I say this, I need to do more of it. But whenever you do that, set an intention, say, hey, I would like to talk about what your thoughts are on, when I go through like really, really bad calls, or calls that really affect me. We pre-plan any operation that we want to be successful. Actually, not just we want to be successful, but if we don't brief our people on information, we'd be the crappiest cops ever, right? So you don't cover any crime trends. You don't review any tactics ever. Like maybe you don't even do a roll call or a briefing. Like, you just never do it, because you're like, oh, we'll just figure it out. We'll figure it out on the fly. Can you imagine a special operations team, a SWAT team, having a mission and just being like, yeah, no, we'll just get there. You just pick a spot. We'll work it out. We always do. No, they scout. They get blueprints, or they draw them if they can't get them. Now there's drones, right? And then they do build PowerPoints. They walk through. They do these briefings hours before, in the wee hours of the night or morning, when they're going to hit. They report back. Every single person in the room involved with the thing has to say what they're supposed to do. So there's no confusion. And so if we want to be successful, we got to talk about these things. And it's okay if you're mid-career. It's actually great if you're mid-career because now you have more context to talk about it. You can actually say, hey, I can think about all the times when I said, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. And I kind of just recluded for like a half hour to the rest of the night. I know that's not helpful, right? But by pre-planning, pre-discussing, you can have the conversation to say, yeah, for me and for us, it appears that if I have that kind of call, I'll text you and said, I had one of those calls. Or you do a code word, hard day, or I need to get a heavy lift on, when I get home. Whatever the thing is, right? And so then your spouse at home, your other half knows, and they either say okay or they say, hey, I do need help with one thing, and then can you help me with this, or can we do this thing? Can you take, Emily to her practice, and then like the night is yours, and like have that discussion because maybe it's just insurmountable, but you're like, no, you need it, cool. I'm showing up for kiddo, and then I'm probably going to pass out. Like I'm probably going to go to bed because I am so zonked, right? And you don't have to verbalize all this, but if you verbalize that kind of thing before and you know what your tendencies are, you know what your spouse's desires and tendencies are, then that's how you're going to build this successful model. And it's always a work in progress, like anything in health, right? So relational health, always a work in progress. So tools, talk about it. I already hit that. That could be talking to your spouse, but it might not be, as I also hit on, right? So for me, I touched on this where it's a buddy, that peer support component, right? It's calling up somebody, one of my cop buddies, and being like, well, this was particularly of interest, or this was pretty frustrating. And these days, it's a lot more like administrative and kind of like personnel related. And so it can probably translate a lot better for my non-cop buddies, but truly, like, your friends are your friends and they want to be there. And I think that there's another piece there where it might be your non-cop friends that you want to preserve them from exposing them to the trauma, but you won't know until you consider the individual and maybe even have a discussion in that, right? So your roommate or what have you, your buddy from school, they might not be super affected by that kind of stuff. It might be so distant that they can't even like fathom the realness of it, where you're talking about a thing and it sounds kind of like a movie, so you don't know unless you talk about it, but you got to talk to somebody. So that could be someone in your circles, that could be absolutely a clinician. I've utilized a clinician a couple times in my years in my career, so it doesn't have to be like, oh man, I don't want to talk to the doctor forever, like every week, or a therapist every month of my life. You don't have, that's up to you. It might feel great. And you might be like, yeah, I'm doing 2 a month. I've never been better. We'll see, right? Like, you don't know unless you try. My point is, you got to talk to somebody. And even if talking to yourself, shoot, just record yourself. Journal. That's another version of that, right? Try stuff. Prep and plan your communication. We talked about that, right? I kind of went out of order, but it's just where it came up. So for me, these days, I tell my wife that I went to a kid call, and she knows. I can see her body language shifts a little bit. It's a look of understanding. And then basically, she knows that we have an understanding. She's not going to take something personally if I'm a little snappy or more likely distant and distracted and seemingly dulled emotions. Plan it, and then ask what your partner needs. I mean, I'm talking a lot about ideas of like what to relay. Let's also consider what they need and asking them about that, or asking them to think about it. Say, hey, I don't need an answer now. Obviously, this will be a work in progress, but please think about it. Take some notes, bring them to the coffee date. All right. And then lastly, check resources. So there are so many resources. EAP, I feel like that's going to get a lot of responses. A lot of people may not have personal experience, but they hear about EAP, or EAP was BS or whatever. But I've actually heard a lot of people utilize EAP and say it was helpful. Or it was a start, right? We went to a couples therapy sessions through EAP, and then we started going on our own. And so again, it's a tool in the toolbox. You don't know unless you look at it, see what is out there, contact your HR, and your employer. Peer support, we talked about that. Chaplaincy, different departments have different chaplains, right? So we talked about it in a recent episode with Pat Ellis, our regional chaplain, but our chaplaincy shows up for the firefighters and cops in our area. Like, it is fantastic. I also show up for the community. Some chaplaincies might not be set up either culturally or operationally to show up for personnel. So one thing to consider, but you will know it best, especially in your own agency or when you talk to people that know, people that are in the peer support wellness space. Also, there's a lot of organizations these days. Shout out to Catherine Boyle over on the East Coast, Philly area, but it's about building events for families. Shout out to Blue Hero Project on the West Coast here, not far from my neighborhood, but essentially, Diane and company and friends, they're dropping off goodies at local PDs, but they're also setting up like family events, Seattle Mounted Police events. So that's pretty awesome. And if you're outside the area, my encouragement is to think about ways that you could get involved in those things, or you can build those things, right? Maybe you and your spouse want to start something like that. These meetups, like kind of these resources and these venues and events to help build community and help build these positive messages and tools and networks, these support networks. Lots of foundations clearly about supporting mental health, whether it's the Overwatch collected down in California, whether it's Code 4 Northwest, helping with people in crisis up here, first responders in crisis, whether it's Copline, we have those kind of crisis and suicide prevention models, right? But there's a lot of different things and resources out there. So dig around, ask around. And if you ask anyone involved with peer support, they generally get a lot of info kind of flowing in and out. So pay attention to that and consider it. And last but not least, I will say, think about health holistically, right? So if I'm having an issue with health on the home front, meaning like if I am just showing up in a crappy way, whether it's this week or this month with my wife and daughter, I should work on that and consider what things I can do directly, but I should also think about what things I could do indirectly. Specifically for me, and I would submit this challenge and this theory to everyone, but if I'm not having physical activity, if I'm not working out and or getting outside, I am not showing up for anybody as well as I'd like to, starting with myself. I'm not going to be well. I'm not going to be balanced. I'm not going to be emotionally regulated. I'm not going to feel great if I'm not exercising regularly. And if you're like, well, I don't exercise regularly, start. I bet you'll feel better. You might not realize the rut you're in, right? This is integral. And I'm not saying you got to slam weights, every other day or every day. That might just be going on a 30-minute walk. Like, what is your level of activity? Try to uplift it a little bit. Like, try to inject one more session, right? Start small. So that's physical. I mean, nutrition. How's your sleep? How is your social health, right? So outside of your family, what about your social circles? Are you hanging out with your friends? Are you hanging out with friends from work and or outside of work? More importantly, outside of work. Why? Because we spend a lot of time at work, right? So our work friends, we spend a lot of time with them, more time than with our families. So whereas I have some lifelong friendships from people that are cops or were cops, certainly, and I have some times I will never forget and always cherish with a really close group of work buddies that I've been told was uncategorically or categorically uncommon, from a lot of people observing how much time we're spending together, going on trips, bachelor parties, weddings, being that close. Wouldn't trade it for anything, but it's not the whole picture. It can't be. finances. Everyone knows the adage of, how many conflicts at home and divorces have a root cause of financial discord. So maybe that's part of your coffee date. It's talking about it. Not so much that it's stressful, but talking about what do we need? What should we consider? Let's write some things down. Let's spitball. Let's game plan. Do we need to talk to a financial coach? Do we need to talk to a financial planner? Do I need to make a note next time I go to work to find out when the next webinar of the free services that we have through the city explaining retirement and benefits? And maybe there's like a budgeting component or an online module I can access there. Like, do I just need to put in like a little bit of effort to do that? And then I will bring that home, right? I'll bring home the resources, I'll bring home the links. So that is constructive, right? Start small. I know it can be overwhelming. I've been extremely overwhelmed at many times in my life and career, and I don't imagine it's over. However, what I feel extremely confident in is that because we continue, so me and my family, and me and my circles, and me and all of you listening, because we continue to have the conversations and build the framework for these healthier practices and foundational pillars of health, right? That aids in our resilience, that aids in building grit and tenacity and the adaptability to get through the hard times, right? So we're playing just to get better, be more durable, be more nimble. That's what all of this is about. Just slowly crafting better routines and framework and mindset so that we can be a best version of ourselves to endure the adversity that will come, that we know will come by virtue of this job or just what life throws at you, right? This is the kind of stuff that will make the difference. So as always, thank you so much for listening in. Please check out bluegritwellness.com. You can subscribe there so you get notified of upcoming things. The Get Gritty course, hit me up if you want that course. It's a self-paced online course based on these things we're talking about, right? So giving you the framework. I asked, so you received. Asked what you all wanted to learn about, and overwhelmingly, people wanted work-life balance and better mindset and wellness tenets that can help them navigate life better, right? The challenges of the job. So without further, you all know how to support. It's giving a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple. Leave a review if you're on Apple. All that stuff does help. The likes on social media, the shares to your story, the shares to your actual friends, right? Like texting them over the podcast episode or the show itself. Those things help immensely. I think that's so much of the credit of why we've been able to grow so quickly is because you all are talking about it with your department, with your teams, with your unit, with your shifts, with your family, with your friends. I so sincerely appreciate it. It is very humbling to be part of this project to help more cops and families, and first responders and just community members than I would have ever perceived. I would have never imagined doing something like this, certainly just a handful of years ago. But I have the credit of a lot of people that have supported me, nudged me, taught me through the years, provided example. Shout out to Diego for putting himself out there in so many ways and nudging me along. And then a lot of my friends and mentors that are here with us today that I'm very grateful for. So again, thank you so much, and until next time.
Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.